Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Sandy Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm really happy to be here. I like sobriety countdowns. They really show the cross-section that's here and all the different places that everybody is on the spiritual path. And they're all equally exciting. Beginning, middle, further down the road. I want to start out by talking about my daughters, and then I'll go on to the rest of my talk, because I owe it to them. My youngest daughter, Barbie, had 5 years in AA. And a couple years ago, she was the chairman of a conference bigger than this in New Haven, Connecticut. And I was one of the speakers. And my other daughter introduced me. So I have a pretty good memory of Barbie, my youngest daughter. And she was murdered 3 months ago when she came home from taking her daughter to high school. And my middle daughter, who is going to be the heroine of this story, she's the amazing one. She found her sister, took charge of everything. She's now the custodian of Barbie's daughter. She just held the family together, had to deal with the police and the press and all those things that are there, and eventually organized. Now my sons came, and they had to do all kinds of the legal work and those kind of things, but she was like the centerpiece of energy for this whole thing. She's got 9 years in AA. She had 3 years before that, and some guy broke up with her, so she got even by getting drunk for a week. You know how that goes. And my first wife, of course, is really devastated by all this. We had 6 children. And so she was there, and we were talking about Conway, and we both laughed to watch her because 12 years earlier, you couldn't trust her with an ice cream cone. She was out in left field, and it looked like there was no hope whatsoever. And then this program got a hold of her and transformed her into this miraculous person who's holding the whole family together with all of her spiritual energy. And it's quite a sight. And 3 months later, last week, my oldest daughter died of our disease, alcoholism. And she died in spite of the fact that she had 2 sisters happy in AA and a father in AA, and none of us could reach in and save her. And that's very frustrating, but that is what it is meant by we're powerless over the disease of alcoholism. And so her suffering is finally over, and we had another gathering. And again, my daughter Conway was just so instrumental in putting everything together and calming me down along with other people. And so people have asked that I seem to be handling it well. So I want to tell you how. I had some role models in my sobriety, and I paid attention to them. They weren't all in AA, but I really paid attention to them. When I saw things that I just caught my attention and really blew my mind, I paid attention. And the first one was when I was in Washington, D.C., probably about 25 years ago. It was the local news, and the reporter was interviewing a very charming black mother whose son had been murdered that afternoon by another boy. Her son was like an honor roll student, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the reporter stuck the microphone in her face and said, "How do you feel about the boy that killed your son?" And she said, "I've already forgiven him." And I looked at her face, and she was as calm as could be. And I'm sure she was so active in her church that she had this message down pat, and the reporter didn't know what to do. He was almost like, "What do you mean you forgave him?" He was almost in a state of shock. But I saw that, and I said, I didn't know that was in the realm of possibility. I mean, I really didn't. I had never seen that before. And about 8 years later, I saw a lady in AA do the same thing. And I was in the same room when she talked about that, and she had that sense of all is right in God's kingdom about her. And then, of course, we all saw the Amish and watched what they did and how they went over to the family and comforted them the same day. So what was there was that these principles and these powers have to be implemented immediately. That's the secret. So when my daughter called me and asked me if I was sitting down and started telling me about finding her daughter, etc., I knew that before she hung up, I was going to accept it and forgive whoever did it. And I just said, from this day forward, I have a new relationship with this daughter on a new level. And from now on, my relationship with her will be memories and stories. And I just told you one about her being the chairman of the convention. And when I finished, I realized that the only thing I had to deal with was sorrow. And I didn't have to deal with anger or hatred or resentment, which are very painful things. And God won't help you with those. He'll tell you, go ahead and forgive and accept. And sorrow, He will help you with. And it's a very comforting thing. And I thought at that time that I had sort of found the bottom line spiritually of situations like this until my second daughter came along, and I found something more fundamental that includes those two things. And when I received that phone call, I don't know why or how or what, but the words that came out of my mouth, there's 4 words that if you will remember them, they will help you immensely. And those 4 words are, I love you, God. I love you, God. I'm not going to deal with this until I spend some time talking to you about how much I love you and how you are the most important thing in my life. Nothing compares with you. Not my program, my daughters, my family. Nothing is more important than you are. And I want you to know that these deaths will never make me love you less. And after a while, I just was free to go back and deal with the situation. And it was as if some power had shown me that everything was fine. This wasn't my daughter, it was God's daughter. He sent her down here, He took her back. And we had a wonderful time while she was here. And again, the only thing I had to deal with was sorrow. And that's hard, but Without his help, I wouldn't be able to be up here and share. I'll tell you that right now. It'd be absolutely impossible. And so the reason I'm sharing is because some of you may have just gone through something, and some of you may have something happen. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be getting fired, and you turn to say, I love you, God. And watch how everything changes. So after a few days went by, and I got thinking about, wow, that was amazing. I talked to my friend who goes to church a lot. I go once in a while, but I'm not a big expert on the big book. And so I said to him, I just came across something that I think is possibly unique. Does it say anywhere that you just turn and say, I love you, God, and it fixes everything? And he said, yeah, it's in a very obscure passage called the First Commandment. So I didn't discover anything new. I just wanted to let you know that. It's funny how there is nothing new. It's just that when we use it, it seems new. And a lot of the program is that way. When we finally realize the spiritual life is not a theory, and we actually test it, yet we find out it was quite amazingly true all along. So as you can see, if you were to ask me my favorite word in the big book, it would be God. That would be my favorite word. And you heard me talk about it this afternoon, that it starts out as just a word. And if you pursue it, it becomes an experience. And that experience with your God is the purpose of being alive. There is no higher level experience that you can have than your relationship with your Creator. So that's enough of my preaching. Now I can tell a little, in case you don't believe I'm an alcoholic, I'll tell you a couple of times I got drunk and got in trouble. Although I was never actually drunk flying a jet aboard a carrier. I want to clarify that after that question this afternoon. I grew up in, I was born in 1931, so the main event in my life was World War II. So when I think about all my childhood years all the way up through teenage, the big centerpiece was World War II. And I saw a lot of things that were difficult, but I also saw, World War II reminds me of AA. The entire country had a common enemy that was going to kill them all unless they all pulled together, which is what we have in AA. We have a common enemy and a common solution. And they really go together, because many of us wouldn't have sought the common solution unless we had the common enemy. I don't think I would have voluntarily went traipsing up the spiritual path if there wasn't a gun at my back called alcoholism. And so I saw a sight that was quite amazing, everyone pulling together. And everybody had somebody in the military, and I had an uncle who was a pilot in the Air Force and an uncle who was in the Army, and it was just amazing. And then came the 50s, and God, it was just one big celebration, and GI Bill and track housing and all the cars that were designed in the 50s that I'm sure car lovers in here just smile when they think about all the cars that were designed in the 50s. Every one of them was beautiful. So there's a whole bunch of things that are pretty wonderful about when I grew up. The problem is, just like everybody else, I had an ego that was telling me what a terrible life I was having in the middle of being taken care of by my parents, being sent to a good church, people all around me, and I persisted in the story that this is terrifying. So it's just, I can't relax. they're all out to get me. I mean, all of those thoughts that we have. And so the church particularly became a place of great discomfort. And I was sitting next to my sister in this church, and she has 33 years in AA, and she never left it. It was the most comfortable, warm, loving place, and I felt it was something like Auschwitz, where they were going to get you, and the confessional box is where they were gathering evidence for later on, so I wasn't going to tell them anything in there. So I had no comfort with the idea of God. It just didn't, when I said it, it didn't bring any comfort. It brought sort of an apprehension. And I don't know, I was a pretty good student. I liked athletics, and I lived in New Haven, Connecticut. I went to a prep school that was a feeder right into Yale University. And I got down there. I had worked on their buildings in construction. You know, it was the local place. And when I got there, however, there seemed to be guys from all over the country that were rich and smart. And they knew what was going on, and I suddenly realized I was out of my league. I mean, what am I doing with these guys? And so I felt very uncomfortable, but I still wasn't drinking. And my roommates are saying, you know, you're in college, you ought to be drinking. No, I want to get high grades, I want to go out for the track team, I got all these goals. And I got so uncomfortable in my own skin that at a social event where I was supposed to meet all these people, I just finally decided to have a drink. And I had almost 3 drinks, and I turned around, and I was equal to everyone in that room, and everyone in the room wanted to know me. They thought I was somebody. And I started rationing my time. I can't spend a lot with each, you know, I got to go move on to this guy. And so alcohol didn't change me, but it changed the world that I lived in. And it was a one fine world. Everything was wonderful, and I loved it. I just went, man, the secret to life is stay in this world. And the way you stay there is to drink. And so drinking went from an unknown quantity at age 19 to my favorite thing. Number 1 on the hit parade was drinking. I had those 3 drinks, and then I said the same thing a lot of people do. Wow, if 3 drinks did that, what would 20 drinks do? So I got that out of the way on the first night. I found out what 20 would do. They'd make you really sick until you're vomiting and sleeping next to the toilet, and you are near death's door. And in the morning, in that shape, the thought occurred to me, are you going to drink again? And I went, of course I am. I said, this puking and almost dying is a small price to pay for what I had last night. So that makes me an alcoholic. The experience that I had from drinking was worth almost dying for. Non-alcoholics don't have that spiritual-like experience. They don't have something that is worth dying for. They have some fun. Yay, that was fun. I had a bunch of drinks last night. Boy, was that fun. You don't hear them saying, I just discovered the secret of life. I did discover the secret of life, and I put all my money on it. And of course, as the years go by, the price gets bigger and the pleasure gets less. So our ability to rationalize has to increase in order to make it come out right. So that's the dynamics of my alcoholism. It produced something that was so beyond human that I was willing to do whatever it took to keep it up. And it took high grades, and it took no athletics, and getting in fights, and going to jail, and almost not graduating. It just took everything. But I had a good time losing everything. So it appeared worth it. And the Korean War was going on. Everybody had to join the military, so a group of us had a few beers and joined the Marine Corps. Oh boy, is this going to be fun. And those of you that went in the military, you know the initial indoctrination is like, are you kidding? I remember thinking in my bunk at night, these sergeants ought to lighten up. But anyway, that went on and on and on. It took about 6 months, and then I'm a second lieutenant, platoon leader. And I think I would have just gone ahead with that, except I saw a movie about pilots. And all of a sudden, I'd never been in an airplane, but I looked in there, and those guys really looked like they were having fun. They had scarves, and they're talking with their hands at the bar, and there's these pictures of airplanes flying around, and there were some blondes in the background, and nobody was sleeping in a sleeping bag in the snow. And I signed up for that. So I like that. That looks good. And I passed the physical. I had met this woman who was the mother of our 6 children while I was down at Quantico. And so we got married and went off to Pensacola to flight school. And I got airsick on the commercial flight going down there. And airsick in the first 6 flights in the old SNJ, and my instructor was going, son, I don't think you're going to be here long. But the motion sickness went away, and all of a sudden I was home. I was meant to be. I would suddenly be number 2 or 3 in my class as we went along through night flying and formation and carrier and bombing and all the things. And pretty soon I'm in advanced training in Texas, and got some jet training, and got the set of wings and a set of orders to Japan with some 3 months of training at El Toro in California, and the war's over. So we're going over to Japan, frontline squadron, just fly and drink. I mean, boy. And that was the old days when there was just a lot of drinking in the military, especially with the pilots. And that lasted, I was long out of the Marine Corps, but it was still going on, the heavy drinking and flying, until Tailhook in Las Vegas. Anybody remember Tailhook when all the Navy pilots were out there and they were harassing women in the hallways, and one of them was a daughter of an admiral? All of a sudden there's congressional hearings, and suddenly the commandant of the Marine Corps said, we will have no alcoholics in the Marine Corps, get rid of them all. And it was hell in the Marine Corps for a while. Well, that was after I got out. So I'm in a squadron where we go to the officers' club. We have our own table with a big symbol of the picture or model of the plane in the middle, and the colonel's ordering the drinks. You didn't order them on your own. Bring another round for my boys. And he was ordering them fast enough that I didn't have to sneak drinks. You know how you're in a crowd and nobody drinks as fast as we do, so you have to go to the bathroom every so often. Hey, bartender, boom, boom, and then you go back and you drink with them. And the drinks were coming as fast as I wanted them. So I just was, this is great. I'm in with these guys, and we had a lot of exciting times over there. It was a lot of fun. And about 9 months into it, I was out in the end of the runway with the maintenance officer, a big red-headed major, and he was talking about how he was going to get, we were practicing for the carrier, and we were watching our buddies. You practice on the field, and then you go out. And so he was talking about getting his own squadron, getting all the best pilots in the Marine Corps, and he looked at me and said, and I want you. And I'm a young lieutenant, and I'm going, wow. And then he said, but I wouldn't let you drink. Now, this is a guy I get drunk with all the time, wouldn't let me drink in his squadron, and I didn't understand. I didn't say anything. I just pretended I didn't hear it. I wasn't going to pursue that. What do you mean? I didn't want to hear what he meant. And it wasn't until I got to AA that I realized if you're an alcoholic, your drinking scares heavy drinkers. It frightens them. They go, we're just drinking a lot. What is he doing over here? There's something dangerous about the way we're going after this that frightened him. So that was my first clue. But I knew inside. I mean, I'm getting drunk all the time, and I'm missing out on things and spending money I don't have and all that. And so I ended up 14 years in the Marine Corps, and then I lost my career to drinking. And during those years, I had all kinds of wonderful assignments. We kept having children. Pretty soon we had 6. There's barely room at the table. And I had been all over the place, overseas, another tour, and out with the infantry Marines as a forward air controller, and then flight instructor, and then in photo squadron during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And on the outside, it looked like I was really doing well. But on the inside, the disease of alcoholism was now in its final stages of taking over my life. And I was now flying in withdrawal, alcoholic withdrawal. I was getting ready for the convulsion and the DTs and all that. And so I'm trying to keep flying. I don't know anything about AA, and there's no alcohol program, so I just go, I guess you just stay with this until the bitter end. And so I would go up and fly and have nightmarish things happen. I'm going to pass out, and flew with my hand on the ejection seat a lot in case I did pass out. And it was terrifying. And some days it would be all right, and then other days I just would be, my heart would be going like that. But I just kept going. And finally one day, I was in a flight of 4 airplanes on a cross country. This was not the Crusader, the photo plane. We had a radar plane that was easy to fly. That other one was, I'm amazed I never had an accident in it. But anyway, we're on this plane, the flight of 4 coming home, and I had to get out of the plane. I finally got to that point. I don't know if you've ever had that, where you have to leave where you are now. You may be watching a movie, but you're leaving. Or you may be getting a haircut, or you may be shopping, or whatever, and you just go, I'm out of here. And like you have to leave, or you might get a heart attack or something. And I had to get out of that plane, and it didn't have an ejection seat. And besides, it had a radar guy in the right seat, and I couldn't leave him in there. And so I just went, okay, we had an oxygen emergency, and I called the flight leader. Something wrong with the oxygen over here, emergency. When you do that, you have to land immediately. So he looked down, he saw some Air Force base nearby. Whew, we're on the ground. And I run over to the club, I get a few drinks, and I'm breathing and all that. In the morning, they don't find any oxygen problem. Oxygen's fine. And I looked at the flight leader and I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm not going to fly anymore. So at that point, my alcoholism told me to give up my whole career. Tell that man that you want to give up the thing you love the best. And I said to him, I'm not going to do this anymore. And somebody else flew us back to Cherry Point. The colonel wanted to know, what? I said, I'm not going to fly anymore. Why? Can't tell you. I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. So they had nothing to go on. And he said, well, then we got to wait. We got to tell Headquarters Marine Corps, and they're going to have to give you a new specialty. Took about 3 months, and I became an air traffic controller, which I'm not going to go into. I didn't. But it shows the insanity of it. And then about a year after that, I was in the nut ward, which led to AA. But the thing I've been talking about recently, because it's such a powerful lesson in it, was the 3 months that I was waiting for a new assignment. I did the legal work. I said, I'll do that. So I had this little office, and I just stayed in there. I never made eye contact with those pilots. They were all my buddies, but I wasn't looking them in the eye anymore, because this was a hot outfit. There was no lieutenants, just 15 pilots, lieutenant colonel, 2 majors, and all captains. And I could feel them looking in just with disgust. So I remember it was 3 months of just shame, and I could hardly wait to get out of there. I didn't want to just be around them. And finally I got transferred, and then, as I said, within a year I was had a grand mal seizure and ended up in the nut ward for 6 months. And out of there I found AA. And shortly after that, I didn't get promoted to major and lost my career. So anyway, 2 years ago, I'm out in California. I know some of you have heard this story, but 2 years ago, I'm out in California, and I'm talking at the Brentwood Group down in Los Angeles. And they have about 500 people. And the format of the meeting is they get somebody, an old-timer, somebody with some time, and they talk about a topic. They used to have Chuck Chamberlain go there all the time. And then people in the group raise their hand and ask questions. I just love that format. It just was wonderful. So I'm waiting to do this, and this girl comes up who's getting her 30-year medallion, and her husband drove her there. He's not in AA, but he goes to meetings with her all the time. But that night, he was just going to go have some coffee and come back and pick her up. And she's telling him Sandy Beach is leading the meeting. He says, was he a pilot? And she said, yeah. He says, I think I know him. Tell him to come out here. So I went out just outside the door of the meeting. There's this guy. I've never seen him. And he said, in 1962, you were flying in a flight of 4 F-3Ds. You declared an oxygen emergency, and all the planes landed, and you never flew again. And I went, gee, how do you know that? He said, I was in the plane with you. So this guy, that's true story. Jim Heth. And so I said, you were? He said, yeah. And it turns out he wasn't a radar guy. He was a pilot. He was an American airline pilot that had been recalled for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the cross country that we were on, that I didn't remember, was the hurricane was coming to Cherry Point, and you have to fly all the planes where it's safe. Then you drink until the hurricane goes away, and then you fly back. And so there wasn't any radar guys going on that one. That was all pilots. So Jim was in the right seat. And the next day I was talking at Oxnard at a convention, and so he came up and he had all these photographs of the squadron. And he said, I said, oh yeah, I remember that colonel now. And then he's showing me all these things and how much fun he had and all the excitement and this and that. And then he said, did you know how much everybody liked you? He said, it broke our hearts that you were leaving. The colonel was going crazy. He was calling all his friends. What can we do? I don't want to lose this guy. And it's just when you left, we just sat there and we almost cried. Now, that's not what I remember. So what I remember must be wrong. So I had to go back to 1962 with an eraser and go, erase, 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 and fill in the 3 months with, everybody liked me immensely, and it broke their heart that I was leaving. So I went back and changed the past. I guess I never knew you could go back and change the past. Well, I just did. I substituted my version of what happened to the truth, for the truth. And when I put that in there, that was pretty pleasant to think about. I still think about it. And I said, wasn't it nice to those guys? It's a pleasant memory now. And I would submit that a great deal of our lives fits in that category. I heard a speaker jokingly say his story was divided into 2 parts, what happened during the years that he drank and what he thought happened during the years that he drank. And I would submit that the rest of your life could be, you could say the same thing. My childhood's divided into 2 parts, what happened when I was a child and what I thought happened. And the trick is to get rid of what you thought happened and find out what really happened. And that's how you destroy the world that you live in that we were talking about earlier today, is to question everything that you thought up and see if it stands the test of running it by other people. See if it stands the test of praying about it. And pretty soon, you can look back at your life with a lot of love and understanding, and you're going to feel very differently about yourself and about God and about the world in general. So that was a mighty powerful lesson that came out of that guy coming up and telling me. And he stays in touch. I've gotten, when my daughters had this tragedy, I got about 250 cards over my first daughter from all over the place with the nicest messages, and groups would all sign it and send it. I even got one from an Al-Anon group in Alaska, and they all signed it and wished me well. So you can see we belong to quite a family that is very caring and wonderful. So anyway, I went on, and as I told you, and I lost my career, ended up with the 6 kids, no job. I didn't prepare for it. Suddenly being out in civilian life, and we had a hardest time. All those early years of sobriety, in terms of money, were just ridiculous. The power's being cut off, the battery dies in the car. Well, I'll have to get a ride to work till payday, and then I can buy a battery. And I don't think we had credit cards yet. But we still had a lot of fun. And I went to meetings all the time. And in Washington, D.C., most of them were speaker meetings. And they were so powerful to just sit out there and hear the whole story. And a lot of times, until you've heard somebody tell their story, you really don't know them that well. I know in Tampa, they don't have that many, so I started 3 new speaker meetings. And they're big meetings now. And we'll get people to talk, and somebody who's been going to a discussion meeting with them for 15 years go, I didn't know you were from Wisconsin, and you were I was in the middle, and there's all this connecting that goes on when somebody tells their story. And that's where you hear the miracle, because you hear what this person was like, and then you see what they're like now. It's not a theory. It's not a story you're reading. It's real. And that meant a lot to me. To just see that. And then there were the speakers that made me laugh. We had 3 lawyers that talked up there, and anytime one of them was speaking, I'd drive for an hour, because I knew I was going to be treated to a lot of laughter about this damn situation I was in. And I found when I could laugh about seemingly difficult situations, it was hard to keep them difficult. Because how could they be that serious if you're laughing at them? And that was very, very helpful. I had the same sponsor for 42 years. Bill Terwilliger is another Marine. He passed away about 3 years ago, and I went up and saw him. He had emphysema. We all were big smokers. I stopped just in time so that my lungs came back. And we went to the group where he took me to my first meeting out in Manassas, and they asked me to talk out there. The group knew what was going on, that this was probably the last time I was going to see him, and we just had the best time. And when I was saying goodbye, we both just said, we had one hell of a run, didn't we? And it was just celebrating all the times we had over those 42 years. A lot of it I was not there in Virginia anymore, but we were on the phone, and I'd go back, and as a matter of fact, he 12-stepped me at my house outside of the Marine base in Quantico. And many years later, he and his wife were celebrating their 20th anniversary, something like that. And I said, Bill, I'm going to fly up to Virginia, and I'm going to take you and your wife out to any restaurant you want to go to. He said, okay. And I pick him up in his house, and I said, where's the restaurant? He said, I'll show you. I'm not going to tell you. So we drive along, and here we are. We're coming down Route 1, right where I used to live. And we're driving along, and he said, turn in here, which was the driveway to my house. And it was an old stone house that I was renting, and they turned it into a German restaurant. So we're having dinner. Now we end up in the living room at a table, the room where he 12-stepped me. So we're having dinner at the table, and halfway through the dinner, he said, I want to point something out. And I said, what? He said, it's a long way from that door to this table. And it was 20 years worth of journey occurred between that door and the table we were at. And we used to joke about that all the time. So then eventually I retired, went down to Tampa. I've been down there 15 years, and I love it. You never know when you retire, if, it looks good, but then when you get there, put the rubber on the road and you go, oh God, I didn't know about this, I didn't know about this. I love it. So I made just a wonderful decision, and I love where I live, and I love the AA. It's just like you guys, enthusiastic, lots of new people to work with, one of every kind of a background, and I get to hear all the different perspectives, which I think is so important. Way back when, the airlines were trying to get a pilots group together, which they now call Birds of a Feather. And it's for alcohol, that's where the airlines send their guys to make sure they're going to meetings and get feedback from the other alcoholic pilots and all that. So I said, yeah, I'll help start that. And so I was there. And I think my friend Hal Marley was involved in that. And we had the union, airline union, the FAA, the flight surgeons and all that. So anyway, the thing got set up, and I said, boy, this is exciting. I got a meeting over at National Airport with just pilots. Do you feel the ego? Just pilots. And so I go over there, look at this, just pilots around. I'll tell you, after about a year, I was sick of it. Same old crap from the same guys. Well, I'm flying and I'm doing this. And I said, give me a meeting with a lot of housewives and old people and black people and young people so that I hear the truth. So I've changed my mind about special purpose groups. I don't like them anymore. If I see another pamphlet for another subdivision within AA, I'm going to rip it up. I think they're getting ready to write one for left-handed old people. Oh, good. Because left-handed old people have very special problems, and they have a unique way of getting sober. Okay, that's enough of my resentment. I'm going to get that out of the way. It didn't show, did it? Tomorrow you'll hear more about that. Well, that's what the schedule said. Right? Isn't that what it said, Bob? Air all your complaints. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is I'm pretty happy. Now, why am I happy? I think the reason I'm happy is that the process of the 12 steps changed my perception about everything. Clancy calls alcoholism a disease of perception. Well, life is the disease of perception. And if you're not looking at it right, it can be painful. But if you use God and these steps, you will be given a different way of seeing it. It's like Chuck said, you get a new pair of glasses. And when they put them on, then you get it. Then you get it. And you go, wow, the world makes sense. Life is fine. Yeah, I see what God's up to. Yeah, oh boy, this is nice. Nobody tells you about it. You see it. And then you like what you see, and you're comfortable with what you see, and that's the way it is. And that is what I think a spiritual awakening and a continued contact with God produces, are these glasses that keep getting better and better. And we joke about perhaps we should have a ceremony in our home group when the new person has reached the stage where we can hand him or her the new pair of glasses. You finished all these things, you've made the amends, come on up, Mary. So we hand her the glasses, she turns around and goes, oh my God, and a smile, and we're all happy and everything. And we say, now listen, Mary, we want to give you one little thing. We strongly recommend you throw away those old life sucks glasses that you've been wearing. But like the rest of us, she decides to keep them in the bureau drawer just for old time's sake. And I'll be damned if a couple months later she hadn't put them back on, just to see what it's like to get back in the misery, because we're very familiar with that, and our ego prefers us to be there. And we're back where everything looks terrible. And if we got a good sponsor, they rip those glasses out of our hands, get us back on track, and they ask us what's going on, and we tell them, and then they go, "You're wrong. No, that's wrong. No, that's not even a problem. No, you're wrong about that. No, you're wrong." And then they help us get our perception back, and then we go, "Oh yeah, everything is all right." And I got that lesson early in sobriety when I ran to my sponsor. The sky was always falling. You know what I mean? "Oh, Bill, wait, we're going to guess what's going on? I don't have any money, and the colonel doesn't like me. We're going to need money." And then he'd go, yeah, okay, I hear that. Yeah, but listen, you and I are speaking next week up at the Annandale group. That's one of the big groups. They really love you as a speaker. You really have got the ability to make people laugh. And I'm going, yeah. And you're making the coffee now. You see how happy people are? You've got that down just to a sign. Yeah, that's so. And then we're going to be going over here, and he gets all through, and I go, "Well, if you look at it that way, that's a new pair of glasses. Stop looking at it." Well, what do we do when it looks bad? We spend weeks looking at it. That's all we do. Where you go? "I'm going to go home and look over. I'm going to look at this again. I'm going to take a closer look." Did you ever hear that one? I'm going to take a closer look at how bad it is. Somebody ought to just come in our house and get out of here. So that's what perception is. It's the greatest gift. It's why spirituality is so wonderful, because it takes away the old view and puts in the truth, which is God's world. And when we see what God sees, it's beautiful. And it's a great place to be. And if you're new, you probably don't understand a word I'm saying about perception, but you don't have to figure anything out. If you want to take my advice, you will only ask one question. What do I do next? That's the question. You don't figure anything out. You just keep coming back. Okay, I did that. Now what do I do? Okay, now you go over there and help the people clean up. Now you go greet those new people. And just follow what people say when you say, "What should I do next?" Now that doesn't sound like a good plan for living, does it? So we don't ask you to analyze it. What we ask you to do is write down how it was when you decided what needed to be done. What did it feel like? What was life like? And then write down what it feels like when you do what is suggested and see which gets the best results. And if you're honest, you'll find out that things work a lot better when you ask, "What should I do next?" And we start out asking that of our sponsor, then we ask it of our home group, and then we have a circle of spiritual advisors, and finally we ask God, "What should I do next?" And then do it. That is the entire secret of life. God, what should I do next? And then do it. Why don't we like that? Too simple. You remember that this afternoon? We don't like simple things because that's doable. And we need excuses for why we're miserable. Well, did you ask God what this? Yeah, that stuff doesn't really work. I've got stuff. I always used to have, not anymore, I used to have problems that were the exception to the steps. The steps don't apply to these problems. I have to interject my own thinking on these. And of course, they get a big mess, and then somebody says, "Have you tried making an amend?" No. Well, try it. All right. Then you make the amend, you feel better, and you realize the secret to everything is ask God, what he wants you to do next, and do it. Thank you all very much.